Hi everyone, thanks very much for joining us today. My name is Owen Macaulay, that's E-O-I-N for international listeners. Sorry in advance, you're probably going to get tired of listening to me introduce myself multiple times in this particular episode. I am, of course, the guy behind the Tallaght Academy of Sequential Art, TASC, T-A-S-Q, TASC Art, based out in Tallaght. Back in August of 2024, I hosted a number of panels for Dublin Comic Con. What you're going to listen in our first episode here today of Creator in Conversation are a number of live recordings taken at the Convention Centre in Dublin. We've broken this episode up into 3 parts. Each part is a different panel featuring a number of rising talent within the Irish comic scene. This first segment you're going to hear from Colm Griffin, who will return later in another episode of Creator in Conversation, Danny Earls, Ellie Wright, and Ruairí Coleman. Now, those 4 were the main speakers for this particular panel, but we had a special edition guest of Declan Shalvey who arrived in late, so if you hear any teasing going on halfway through the episode, that's just the panelists tearing into Shalvey for appearing late to the panel. And we also had at this stage Rhys Hannigan, who was yet to be announced as the new artist behind Star Wars Bad Batch for Dark Horse. So Rhys was actually just sitting up into the front row. Funny behind the scenes story on this particular episode, our table was nice and set up with the recording device, but in typical fashion, the tablecloth spilled along with someone's coffee, so we're lucky that we were able to salvage this recording. So this is part 1 then, featuring Colm, Danny, Ellie and Ruairí. Hope you enjoy. Okay, so the recording should be live. Hi everyone, thanks very much for joining us today. My name is Owen Macaulay. I'm the president behind this new academy called the Tallaght Academy of Sequential Art, or TASC, T-A-S-Q, TASC Art. What we cover is sequential art and primarily comic books. Within that field of comic books, there are some adjacent fields as well, like animation. So we just had some reps from Cartoon Saloon deliver a panel talk, character design bleeding into games. But our main focus is comic books. Here to my right, we have a fine selection of some of the best in the Irish comic industry at the moment. So what we do is we'll start off with yourself, or if you just want to introduce yourselves along the panel then, and we'll kick off into some Q&A, okay?
My name's Ruairí Coleman. I've been doing comics for about 12 years. Currently working at Marvel Comics. I've done Captain Marvel. I'm working on a Spider-Verse comic at the minute called Spider Society, and just announced with Derek Landy, we're going on to do Infinity Watch miniseries. That's to do with the Infinity Stones and stuff you might have seen in the Marvel movies. And then Ellie?
Yeah, I'm a professional colorist. I've been painting professionally for about, I would say 8 years, but working in comics for about a decade or more. And I work for Archie Comics. I've worked with Riverdale, Sabrina, a few other one-shots as well. I've worked with Mad Cave, Dark Horse, and I do a lot of work with Dynamite. So yeah, it's really fun. Up to you.
I'm Colm. I've been in comic books for probably maybe 6 years. I work in animation and film directing mostly. I've worked on a lot of properties that are way beyond everybody else's years here. Giant robots for, I've worked for Titan Comics. I've done some stuff for, who wants I work on actually?
Yeah. Your friend is it?
Oh yeah, they're all with Titan. At the moment I'm doing Power Rangers essentially. So I've been working on that recently enough, and I'm hoping to kind of go further in comic books for like Marvel and DC hopefully at the end of the year.
My name's Danny Earls. I've been drawing comics professionally for about 18 months now. Way less than these veterans over here. I'm currently working on the Hulk for Marvel. Done stories for DC like Lobo, done Batman covers for DC, but yeah, currently on Hulk until November. My whole family's in the back there. If you don't want to introduce yourselves, these characters.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, everyone, and thanks for joining this panel. So I suppose we're going to be throwing out the Q&A fairly soon. A lot of our workshops and panels here, talks are focused at people who have curiosities, interests, and just desire to quote-unquote break into industry. That's probably, I'm going to imagine for you guys, since as soon as you start getting into published both, start off indie and then mainstream, that must be the number one question you get to get the home conventions. How do you break in? So just briefly then, what would be your origin stories then? What was your first significant, you feel is your, not the very first project, but perhaps the project that you felt, oh, now I feel like I'm in the comic book industry?
My first ever published work was with Ruairí Comics in Ireland, Hellfire. It was called. It was a 30 pages. I wrote it, drew it, and lettered it myself. I basically done it to kind of just teach myself comic books, the ins and outs of how to do anything to do with comic books. It's the only independent publishing I ever done. From there, I just pretty much worked on samples the whole time. I got really lucky. I'd done samples. I'd made some connections, obviously, through the years, trying to go to Comic Cons and speak to pros and get advice for near on a decade. And I made some great connections on the way. Just kind of mostly people do that. That was their route in. Like they'd focus on self-publishing and put book out after book out. I was doing samples, I suppose, but behind the scenes, not necessarily showing them online. I was doing samples and showing them to pros and getting feedback that way. But then I got really lucky. I done samples, I think, nearly 2 years ago now. I went to Top Bubble in Leeds, and Gail Simone was there. I'm one of the biggest writers in comics. And I luckily showed me work, and she kind of blasted it out online. And I've been talking to like a lot of people, editors in the industry anyway, but when she blasted out, kind of had a little bit of a kick behind it. And then they emailed me, and since then I've been super fortunate to stay in comics, I don't think mine's probably a bit more unique in that respect and not putting out a lot of published work before that. But yeah, super grateful.
But I remember once hearing C.B. Spolsky say, like, breaking into comics like breaking out of prison. When someone finds a way, it's like closed. And
That's a good way of putting it.
Just to skip over to Ellie, you had a really interesting experience when you were breaking into comics. You were involved in a project down in Cork, wasn't it? It was it Cube site Z Cube, was it? I'm forgetting now.
Red Q Studios.
Oh yeah, that's the one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a workshop at the time in Dublin, and there was a famous colorist, Jory Blair, and she was hosting a workshop, and she was looking for people to do it. So I just sent my portfolio in, and I was hoping for the best, and luckily I got accepted. And from there, really, I got to come to the workshop and speak to Jory, get really good advice, learn some new techniques, and yeah, that kind of sent me on my way, I guess. Yeah. And also, I was going to say, Owen, as well, you gave me one of my first published works as well with Lightning Strike Press. Am I saying it right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you actually did as well. And I was able to kind of bring that to conventions and show people because I actually had published work. So you and actually Gary Moloney as well with Limit Break Press. Am I saying it right? I think I get a bit nervous, sorry. So yeah, you guys really helped me because I was able to show people that. I remember I got my first work with Dynamite because there was an editor looking for someone to do flats for a colorist, and I was able to show the work I did with you and Gary, and that's how I actually got my foot in the door. So you guys helped me as well, like a lot as well, yeah.
Well, I have just two quick things to add. The first is I need to apologise profusely. I only found it this morning that there's actually a Limit Break panel happening at the same time. So I put on a conflicting comic panel about realising. So my apologies to Limit Break and particularly to Paul as well. Totally. So I'm on the record now. So this morning I could nearly die when I find out on this ladder. And the second is just about what you were mentioning about publishing with Lightning Strike and Limit Break. That's really important as well. When it's like a small, let's say, small press that's independently published, editors do appreciate seeing you brought a project to completion. There's a track record. It doesn't have to be a major book at all. It doesn't have to be even a known entity. It just shows you can bring the project from conception to publishing. So if you get the chance, conventions, awesome to meet with people, like-minded individuals, and collab. So thanks so much, Ellie. I'm going to jump back over to Colm now, just because you have a very interesting career as well, because in terms, at the start was mentioning about, the adjacent and transferable skills. So you come from a wide, varied media background.
Yeah, so I'm probably one of the silly ones. I said, I don't want to give up my other job just to have a job in comic books. And me and Dan had a conversation the other day, can you be great in both? And I said yes, he said no. So I guess we'll find out 10 years when I'm doing an animation panel here and I'm not in comic books anymore. I'm still kind of on the indie side of doing sequential work at the moment. Like I'm still kind of working with some smaller publishers. But the big thing kind of for me to help me kind of kick off is my cover work seems to be kind of broadcasting me a small bit to the next level. I did my first full cover that came out for Image Comics was for a book called Radiant Black. But I remember I had worked with Kyle on that, and I finished it, and it didn't come out for 2 years, and I figured like that was my chance to kind of give it a good go. And I remember it was at Christmas time, and I was really under a tight deadline, and I couldn't do it, but I decided I should do it. And then 2 years later, it finally came out, so it paid off. And from there, then animation is kind of a weird kind of company or situation to be in, because we were working on a TV show with a crowd that was in Australia, and they happened to be doing the animation for a new Turtles movie. So I was given the opportunity to do a poster for them for their actual Netflix international show, and because of that, then I was able to kind of move that along, and I got some Transformer stuff off of IDW. And then from there, then a trip to Top Bubble. So actually that man in the back of the room there I worked with, Deck, was very kind to give me a cover for his Create Your Own book, which was Time Before Time. And from there then, that book alone, it's a sci-fi book, so that then led somebody else in Titan Comics to my door, and I've been kind of trying, I work with Titan Comics on a couple of projects, and they're all kind of giant robots and anime, which is, I guess, adjacent to animation. And from there, it seems to be that everybody comes to me to draw giant robots. It's the same on Power Rangers at the moment. So that's essentially where I am right now. But I am hoping again to kick on at the, got a lot of Deck has been very gracious and giving me a lot of time and just kind of helping my portfolio. So I guess I'm different in that regard from everybody else up here, that I'm still kind of trying to kick on and to the next step. So hopefully with Deck's guidance and just all of the other stuff I see everybody else doing, I can make that leap from covers into sequential work now in the rest of the year.
And best of luck as well. Baltimore Comic Con come up to the Ringo Awards. So far, is it the best
cover artist? Yeah.
So very best of luck.
Cheers.
And Ruairí as well. So.
Yeah, I was sort of the similar pipeline that you were saying. Like I started out as well in homegrown independent comics. There was a group in Derry maybe 12 years ago, Uproar Comics, and they'd done a zombie comic. So I started out doing zombies for a while, and then I'd done some work for Atomic Diner, which they're attached to Subcity, the comic shops here. So I done a few books for them, and then it was actually Will Sliney, comic artist out of Cork, who had sort of been sharing some work online, as you do, and he'd recommended me for some things at Dynamite. So I've done a stint in Dynamite, similar to Ellie, and I kind of jumped back and forth, and like with Marvel. In 2018, I got some Cloak and Dagger work, and then I was back in Dynamite, and then a few years later, I got a little bit more Marvel work with like another Spider-Verse book and an Iron Man annual, and then like back to Dynamite IDW. And now for the past year or so, I've been at Marvel doing like a string of books. I've also done a few creator-owned projects in between. With Comixology, we have a book called Astonishing Times. I've been working on 2 volumes of that in between, which has been nice to sort of do the creator-owned thing a little bit. We just finished our 2nd volume of that, and I worked my way into a little bit of writing as well on that. And to get everything done, to pencil it and write it, I had to bring in an inker, and then we found Rhys Hannigan, who's here at the front as well, has come along. He's been finishing my pencils and helping me get that book over the line, and hopefully then we'll have more work, on the creator-owned front for Rhys as well. If he doesn't get snapped up by a publisher before we can lock him down.
Just to bring Rhys in as well, because if I Rhys in as well onto the talk, so you were just saying you're starting to head out now to New York Comic Con, getting ready to put together the portfolio and everything. Excited for the show?
Very much so. Like, I only ever done like Irish shows till last year, and then of course Danny became a movie star after the Thought Bubble. So I tried some with Thought Bubble last year, and it took off pretty well, and a lot more people see my work, and now I have like connections with editors that I never had before, and then kind of trickled them with Ruairí there then, and now I'm going to New York now to see what I can do from there, and try and get some work maybe with some other American companies to see what happens from there.
Awesome. I love how no matter where you go into the world, at a convention, on a holiday, the Irish will always find themselves. I get it. But no, that's great, and thanks so much for everyone sharing like your secret origin stories, as it were. Now, we've gone just to questions in just a moment as well, but just before, just out of curiosity, what's everyone reading at the moment themselves? Are you guys all just blocked up book work? Because that's the one question I always ask, and I'm always surprised that everyone's is like so deadline orientated. Like, wait, I used to read this stuff before, I know it's just like deadline after deadline, but is there anything on your shelf at the moment? Or maybe it's a project that you're currently working on as well, that you're just digging as well at the same time, or...
Yeah, I'm on the Hulk at the minute, so that pretty much takes up every waking second. But when I do get a chance over lunch or something, I'm reading Vagabond. Actually, I was just talking to the other day to Colbert that I read the book of 5 Rings years ago. Didn't know it got turned into a graphic novel, and that is like, it's pretty much turned into pretty much my favourite comic ever. More so the story. The art's amazing, but that's what I'm reading at the minute. My first time really dipping into kind of that side of comic books, apart from Akira, which everyone loves, right? But yeah, that's been really eye-opening. Actually, that has, it's an incredible book. Yeah,
listen, I'm just consumed by Power Rangers at the moment. It's I'm a Mighty Morphin kid, so but the ones I drew are generations later. So before I took the gig, I was like, of course, that's my favourite one. And then when I got off the call, I had to do as much research on the characters as I could. So that's, I'm in that at the moment. It's just...
Have you been going back watching episodes with your kids?
I was. It's a tough watch.
So yeah,
you know what? It holds up about as well as you would imagine it does. And there's also kind of janky CGI on it. And obviously coming from animation, I'm looking at it going like, you know, but it's still fun. Like, it still has the heart that you would imagine it does. And like, the storylines are excellent. But for me, like, when you're kind of looking and doing the research of that stuff, like, it has excellent artists on it. Like, Dan Moore is a superstar as well, and it's great to go and see his iterations of what you remember as a kid and or what I'm studying now, to kind of take from him and how I would draw my version of what they look like and stuff. So it's been interesting enough.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm the kind of the same with you. I'm getting slammed with deadlines, so the only thing I'm reading is like comic books, like scripts that I'm working on. So nothing major at the moment. And then when I go to conventions, and I've been going to a few, I kind of pick up creator-owned books. So they're like my nighttime reading. You know, I don't really have time to sit down and read a proper series at the moment, but yeah, I'd love to. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I have deadlines and 2 young kids, so I don't get bedtime reading so much as I collapse face down as early as possible. So basically, unless it's a script for something I'm working on, I haven't got to read it. I do have like the Marvel Unlimited app and the DC, whatever their one's called, and I like to like skim through comics with art that I like. But that's about the height of anything I get to look at anymore.
And then decorate.
And anything Declan writes. That's another beat.
You know, just because you guys got brought up there with deadlines and stuff and all, so how do you guys approach then the work-life balance approach to it? As you mentioned, maybe you have additional work, then you also have your families as well, then you have multiple projects in the spin. Like, are you night owls? Are you early morning? And you know, a lot of you are working internationally as well. So I imagine since COVID, we're all used now. I think everyone here knows how to use Zoom, you know, which, you know, a few years ago, what was Zoom? And now it's like the bad guy from Flack. Now it's like, oh no, it's this app on our phones. But how are you guys finding it all now at the moment? Any advice or tips you picked up along the way that you went, well, when I started, I would start early in the morning and then realize that's changed? Or do you use much in the way of like a Google Calendar, any apps, anything like that? Or is it just organic? Just you find your flow?
I'd be short and sweet. And this one, I haven't got work-life balance. To be honest, it's pretty much every waking second. There's 2 reasons that obviously, like, the quality of work you want to be as good, but I feel like I'm in such a fortunate position to be in that I can't give up work. Of course, everyone would wish for more time to be able to even spend with my family and spend with my fiance and stuff. But at the minute, it's not that, genuinely. So I'm not the best person to ask, but I'm also content in that. I'm not sad or depressed or miserable in any way. It's something I dreamed about my whole life, to draw comics from Marvel. So it's really long and strenuous hours, but would I change it? No. Of course, we had to spend time with loved ones and stuff would be massively something I'd love to do. But for the time being, to really kind of get your foot in the door and make sure it's kind of hopefully kicked down and stay in. That's what I feel like I have to do. So I'm definitely no advice.
It's great though, doing what you love. That is, so they say, like, if you do what you love, you don't really walk a day in your life. Is what that's allegedly when they say, right? But no, that's fantastic. That's a really nice sentiment to have out there. And so
I think, like Danny was saying, like, it's a nightmare. It's basically like you get into comic books because you love it and when you want to create them, but you stay in it because you're stubborn and you're bullheaded and you don't know anything else. I work from home and I've got two small kids like Rory. Their playroom has now turned into my studio, which means they're in and they're out for 15 minutes. So you're rolling around on the floor, and then 5 minutes turns into an hour. And then all of a sudden you're still at the desk at 2 o'clock in the morning trying to finish what you should have finished at 10 o'clock in the morning. And then comic books comes on top of that. So I think, like the sentiment there is like, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life because you'll have no life because of the work that you're doing. As simple as that. Like, I've spoken to Dick many a times. We've been chatting at 11:30 at night and he's burning the midnight oil. I'm only getting going in my day. And I'm sure it's the same. Ellie covers 17,000 books every week. So, like, it's one of those ones, like, it's a very fulfilling job to have, and because you're doing something you love, but you'll give up almost everything to do it. And it's a sad thing. It's also it might be a stern thing to hear, but I think you can say that to somebody, but unless they really experience what it's like, you have to have a partner with you or somebody in your life that just understands that. And like I like to say with my wife, like, she's with me that long that she knows what it's like, but I think it's just because my job has beaten her down so much. She doesn't know any different. She doesn't know that there's a better life out there. So she just stays with me. You know what I mean? And I think that's, like, without jokes aside, like, it's great, but it's tougher than you would expect.
It is. You raised two very important points there, which is like, comic books, it's vocational, It doesn't really switch off. It's not like a 9-to-5 office job. You go home, it's like, it's kind of staying with you, and you're not doing it. It's there in the back of your mind. So it's that kind of, vocational aspect. And also, the hard work you put into it, like, it's important to underline that, because I'm sure we've all heard it when we're cooling up. And could you print this for free? Could you draw this for free?
Yeah.
The exposure, it's like, this is, it's good to point out the hard work that goes into it. Like, there's a cost, not just like monetary, but the cost of art.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Daft. And yourself, like?
Yeah, it's the same what Danny and Colm are saying. We're like still kind of climbing the ladder. Like, I'm repeating myself. I know I am, but even though I'm working with Archie, Dynamite, Dark Horse, Boom, wherever, you're like only as good as your last book, and you're always looking for your next job, and you're too scared to say no to when they offer you work. So, and you feel like if you say no, you're gonna like tarnish that relationship with that editor. So at the moment, I have no structure. I'm working, I would say 6-7 days a week, and it could be up to 4 a.m. or I might, start a little bit later, but it's really full on days. It could be 14, 16-hour days. So yeah, I have no structure at the moment. Yeah.
Wait,
and yourself, Rory?
Save us, Rory. Everyone, there's hope. There's hope out there somewhere.
I had been doing 14, 16-hour days as well until 2019, whenever our first child was on her way. And unlike Colm, my wife's from South Armagh, and they will not be broken in South Armagh, so she made it clear to me, and rightly so, like, you're going to have to try to do something to fit this into a more manageable time. And it's true, like, I wanted to be, in my little girl's life, not a guy who, like, I was in the roof space, like a guy who's in the attic all the time and breezes through for dinner. So I done a lot of work to try to, like, to get that work hour day down to maybe 10 hours. And what I sort of realized was, like, something that we've all been talking about here is working in comics is vocational, and there are a lot of compromises that have to be made, and it's going to be made somewhere, whether it's your social life, which, what is a social life anymore? Is it your family? Like, that couldn't be it for me. So it would also have to be then on, like, the hours that I could do at work. And then you don't want to start doing bad work, but you have to start thinking about efficiencies. Like, what does a page need in the bare essence? And this is in terms of, like, drawn visual storytelling. What does a page need to do? What do you need to do it? Like, and when you're starting out, you want to make the most perfect pages ever. And you want everything to look fantastic because you grew up looking at fantastic art and thinking that's what comic art is. But you're working in visual storytelling. You need to, like, get the information across to the reader. You need to make it like interesting to look at, not necessarily impressive, and get the information across. And then if you have time, put the bells and whistles on it. But if you want a 10 or a 10 or 8 hour day, you really have to sort of like nail that down. So that was like a compromise that I chose to make for the work instead of the family life. And like now, especially, my kids are starting to go to school. I have to be there for like school pickups. I have to start like maybe 5 a.m. is like wake up time, and at the drawing board at 6 because I need to be finished for 2 to pick the kids up from school. And that takes a lot of discipline then in terms of like, can't burn the midnight oil, because if I sort of get the kids to bed and then work to 1 or 2 and I'm up at 5, I'm too tired the next day to do work. So I can't chase the work either. So what it really all comes down to is then your deadline is the starting point. Like generally with Marvel, I've been lucky that I get 5 weeks to do 20 pages. But some people say, like, you know, if you do a page a day, you'll hit it. But your writer isn't really thinking when he's writing, oh, I should make it so that this is manageable to do a page a day. No, they're like, Spider-Man swings in and the other Spider-Man's there and Spider-Gwen's there and there's the Scorpions in the corner. He's not doing anything yet, but I want to show him there. And they're like throwing all this stuff at a page and it's like, good luck getting that done in a day. So you kind of really have to look at your scripts and see, like, what is the script asking of me? Where is the downtime? What pages are like talking heads where I can fit 2 in a day? So I can take maybe a day and a half to do this. And so like people will say to me, oh, you're your own boss. You can take your own time. You can take time out and do that. It's like, no, I've figured out what I need to do a day now. So I'm ready in 5 weeks. And so I'm already under the gun from the start, because once you factor in phone calls, like, you know, your daughter's sick and has to be brought home, that's a day gone, you know? So it's a lot about discipline and compromise, but making sure that you're compromising, that you can do your job well, and the things that are important in your life, you're able to maintain those. Like I see friends maybe once or twice a year, but like thanks to WhatsApp, I can maintain those friendships. Less so when you've got like a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, that's pretty hands-on, you know? So it's all about trying to get some kind of balance that works for you. And it's like, as long as you're happy and like the people important to you are happy, then fly on.
That was some Uncle Ben vibes. I was getting like, I was like, great powers.
That would have been a better signal. Fly on.
No, that's fantastic. Listen, thanks so much again to our panelists. It's great insight, because usually at conventions, you know, you've gone to the trade floor, you're buying, getting signatories, but then to actually sit down and have conversation, it's a chance to sit and reflect and just share, well, this is what the working day is like, and particularly for aspiring creators. I want to just try out to see if anyone has any questions at this stage that want to bring up and ask. We're welcome questions from the floor at this stage. Awesome. Also, go ahead.
Yeah, just to speak of the whole work-life balance thing, kind of brought to mind, Jack Kirby had that famous moment where someone asked him about, like, what about getting into comics? And he said, comics will break your heart, kid. And, but, like, do you find it, like, he was more sort of talking about the landscape of things. Do you think the landscape is sort of more open to people being able to sort of crack into this now? Or do you say...
There's definitely more opportunities. Like, the playing field is open in terms of, like, you can realistically get your work in front of people. But at the same time, you're now competing with tens or hundreds of thousands of people trying to do the same thing. Like Marvel have one talent relations guy. So you think of what his inbox is like day to day. So you still have to be as good as a Jack Kirby to be seen, but you also have to be, like, Danny is a great example of, like, he's great at putting himself out there at shows and things. Like, you still need to show up to things like this, because, like, I got put on by Will Sliney on a few books that got me sort of going. So to get out of that, like, it's almost like you're in a cattle pen, and like to stand out, you need to be a face in front of people, and a bit personality goes a bit of a way as well. So there is some legwork involved. The opportunities are greater, but like Owen says, it's like breaking into prison. Once somebody gets in that way, that is now closed to everybody else. So there's give and take. It's probably as hard as it ever was, but it's not as, like, you don't need to move to New York anymore and, like, you know, deal with all that stuff. You can do it from home. It's a little bit more manageable that way, but the competition maybe is fierce as it ever was.
So, thanks so much. Any other questions?
I scared everybody.
Yeah, so far we said to you, everyone's too busy to read comics and fan, and it's going to be all consumed. Yeah. So we're recruiting strongly. Terrified. But no, it is. Like, it's so, oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's worth it. Is that just...
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no other job like it at the same time at all. Like, I don't know. It's great, there's animation and character design, but like, especially like, for drawing comics and the visual storytelling aspect, bar like storyboarding maybe process of getting a script and having to turn words into pictures, and like the unspoken connection between conveying all that information with just a picture, and that to do it in a way that the person looking at it doesn't think it's all there. Like, I don't know where else you get to do something like that. So that's the stuff I think you have to love more so than wanting to draw Spider-Man, because like, comics will break your heart if you are determined to draw a certain character. Chances are slim, but if you just love telling stories, there is no other industry that lets you do what we do.
Also, I remember like seeing your name on screen in credits is really cool, but I think like on the other aspect, I remember when we did our cover, the guy from Midtown Comics sent me a nice message saying that it was sold out, that everybody came in looking for it. And I remember it was Radiant Black, the one I did with Kyle a couple of years ago, like standing in a comic book shop and seeing the last one be sold and just knowing that that was yours. Like, it's different now, I don't have interior art to share, but like, it's a small thing, but it's kind of a big thing because you're locked away weeks on end. And so that's a small thing to see somebody else enjoying it. So if you kind of take something small like that, it can be like a massive boost to kind of push you into the next book or whatever it is that you're doing next. So yeah.
Yeah, and these shows are great too. Like, we were talking yesterday and you brought up the one of the books that I'd worked on, the rule books, to know that someone likes it enough to not only buy it, but then to come to see you about it. As you said, like, we work a lot on our own and we might talk to each other about how's your deadlines, what are you working on, but to actually then talk to people who you've made an impact with, because that's ultimately what you want to do, but you don't realize it's working until you come to a show like this. And then it's so rewarding, like, to meet you yesterday and chat for a while it was fantastic. And we get that, every few months at a show. Every
okay, so I'm just going to do just on yourself, Danny, walking right down, just about upcoming projects then. So if you cover what we can talk about now. I know some folks might have something to talk about, but anything that where we can see your work next, and also where can we follow you? What platforms are you guys on? So I'll start with Danny and walk away across.
Yeah, I'm just Danny Earls 16 across just Twitter and Instagram. I don't have anything else. I find social media hard to keep up with enough as it is. I kind of just post and get out with it. I try to get back to as many people as I can, but that's just it. And then I'm on the Hulk until November. So pretty much there'll be 3 issues between now and November coming out on the Hulk, so you can kind of follow me there. As of then, there's covers. I've got Turtles covers and stuff. A couple more of those to come out, but there'll be sporadic covers the whole time. But as far as interiors, kind of solid work, it's the Hulk until November.
Super.
I'm Art of Colm Griffin online on Twitter and Instagram. I couldn't remember what it was there. I have Power Rangers coming up. I've got some covers coming up with that. I've got an indie book. It's an indie wrestling book that's coming out. It hasn't been released in Ireland yet, but it's at my table if you want one. So that's coming out in the next couple of weeks. They're doing a kind of a big launch there. And then we've got some other stuff kind of coming out throughout the year, just in terms of different covers with image and stuff like that. And then I have a film in the cinema in November if anybody wants to go and see Pierre the Pigeon Hawk. That'll be there.
I might actually give that a watch now, my name is Ellie Wright Art on Instagram, X, and just website as well. And I've got a few Archie one-shots coming out with Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and I'm working with Mad Cave Maverick on a children's kind of series. And I'm also a little bit quiet, but I have more projects with heavy metal and things coming up towards the end of September. So I'm enjoying the break. As I said before, I end nights kind of catch up with you, so I'm enjoying it too. Yeah.
I dropped the ball big time on social media. It's at Ruairí Coleman. If you know how to spell it, you're golden. If not, that's what it is. I have the final issue of our second volume of Astonishing Times. We literally just got the last of the colours in today, maybe yesterday. So that'll be in a couple of weeks on Comicsology and Kindle. Spider Society, which I'm working on at the minute, I believe is out in September. And then, might be October. And then December is when Infinity Watch starts. And I'm also doing, don't know if we get Monster Fun here. It's like a kids anthology comic. You can also get a subscription online for like a pound or a euro an issue. I'm starting like a Power Ranger style kind of strip in there. Be running over like 8 issues starting on their Halloween issue. And that's something a bit more fun, kid-friendly kind of stuff. Because, it's definitely the Astonishing Times isn't for kids. So, something for everybody.
That's fantastic. Listen, thanks so much again to our panelists. We have to reset for our next panel kicking off at 2:15. But everyone be in our society for the rest of the weekend. So, thanks very much, everyone. Thank you again, and hope to see you all again for the days there. Thank you. In this segment, I'm joined by Gary Moloney. Gary's been working with me for the past year along with Rob Jones. We've been translating the Flash Gordon comic strip by Dan Scotty Oscailge. So that's been running in the Irish language in the local paper here in Tala de Tala Echo. So Gary is a really rising talent in terms of comic book writing. He's a lawyer by day, comic writer by night. And in this particular segment, we talk about Gary's book with Mad Cave, as well as what's been like working on the Flash Gordon comic strip. And also, it was at this point again at Dublin Comic Con last August that Gary actually saw one of the Flash Gordon strips in print for the very first time. So we put aside the 90th anniversary Sunday strip, which Gary translated and presented to him at this particular panel. So do listen and enjoy, and be sure to check out Gary's work. He has a couple of exciting projects coming up in the very near future, and no better man to tell you than Gary himself. Thank you. So thanks again, everyone. My name is Owen Macaulay, and I'm the president behind the Tala Academy of Sequential Art at TASC, T-A-S-Q, TASC Art. It's a brand new academy that we've just set up in February this year. We were actually here at Dublin Comic Con last March. Great to see new faces coming along, joining us here today. This panel now is going to be talking about comic strips, blasting from the past into the future. Joining me is Gary Moloney. Gary, do you want to give us a rundown of your credits now? But like there's a couple now. There's a couple you have now. So you've been a busy man.
I've been a busy bee over the last couple of years. So my name is Gary Moloney, and amongst other things, I'm a writer and an editor. I was one of the founders of Limit Break Comics, a Dublin-based comic collective that's focused on putting forward interesting anthologies and series in the small press space. Most recently, I'm the writer on the Mad Cave Studio series When the Blood Has Dried. Co-created that with Daniel Romero and Becca Carey. That has just been completed its run this week. And insofar as TASC is concerned, I've been translating the Flash Gordon strips for publication in the newspaper over here into Irish for the last 4 months, has it?
Yeah, I think we're going on to week 20 or 21. There was a week where I did a guest run, so we've I lost myself track. I had everything numbered, and then I lost track, but it's 20 to 21, which is great because 52 weeks in the year, so we're steadily climbing up and clocking in.
Yeah, we're fully up to half a year now.
Yeah.
That Flash Gordon strip obviously being written and drawn by Dan Scotty.
Yep, and so Dan works directly for King Feature Syndicate. So King Feature Syndicate, they're a division of the Hearst Corporation. If you ever saw Citizen Kane, you know, Kane himself, the character was based on Randolph Hearst, you know, the media mogul. That was kind of the real life inspiration. I had prior experience with the Hearst Corporation and King Features because I'm known for printing and reprinting the Phantom. So the Phantom comics were, it goes to walks. We did an 80th anniversary book here at Dublin Comic Con back in 2016, and that was at the time the Irish comic scene and indie scene has been growing from strength to strength, but that was one of the first forays into Irish indie scene doing licensed IPs. And then what was great was I took a step back. We did some expansion with it. We did a standalone comic with Trina Farrell, Robert Carey and Stephen Mooney called The Phantom Scarlet Sapphire. That was really well received, and we tried to launch a mini-series called The Phantom Strikes 1 to 4. Unfortunately, that's where we were just too small to just do the basic demands and distribution. Distribution is just shocking. If anyone has a chance to speak with Andrea Romano, you should ask her. She shipped over a package in advance, and the shipping was so bad just by standard post that I actually have the package with me here today to hand it to her just to get the it's just crazy. But what was fantastic was when I set up the academy, we were able to revisit King Feature Syndicate, and what we're doing is we are reprinting the back catalogue. But one of the elements I want to do was to translate Flash Gordon into Irish, because the Irish language, if you want to preserve it, you want to catch a younger generation, but also science fiction, it's a much more modern genre that the Irish language doesn't really, we don't have an equivalency per se. Fantasy, that element, fiction, crime fiction, stuff like I did Dunmaroo Air and Dart when I was, in school, like there's plenty, but for sci-fi, not so much. And then I remember asking Gary, initially teasing stuff, and your first response was maybe a pass. I think I got you on the second. Was it the second? I remember the first one I was teasing, and you were actually saying, well, there could be other people who could do it. I remember the first time it was like a maybe or maybe not, and then the second time, that's when I netted you, I think.
Yeah, it was interesting because I think you just, it wasn't, you approached me or text me to be like, I'm thinking of translating Flash Gordon, what do you have to say about that? And at the start I was like, it was nothing further than that. It was just like Flash Gordon, so I didn't know what Flash Gordon or anything like that, or what I was concerned about the commitment of it, to be perfectly honest, because as much as I am a writer and editor who works professionally in comics, and while it's something that I gain a lot of joy from, and I do make some money out of, I also have a day job to be able to maintain that, because like most writers in any industry, particularly when you're starting out, and although I've been doing this since 2018, I'm still very much a young creator, even in terms of my career, if not in reality. So I was just a bit concerned about having to balance the day job with the already strenuous other commitments I had from creating. I was a bit concerned about whether I'd have time for it. But then I think you came back with kind of more of the scope of what it was, and that would be publishing the weekly Sunday newspaper strip. And then that became more once it was tangible and I could see, okay, I can know where I can fit that in, and on the second time as well, I was kind of thinking there are a lot of people out there who work in translation, and I'm someone who has an extensive history with the Irish language. I studied in college. I work professionally in it in my day job as a barrister and as a lawyer, and I've run cases and stuff in Irish. So it's something that I'm very passionate about, and the access to literature and comics and things like that in Irish is something I'm very passionate about, because I think, like you were saying, Owen, there's not enough material out there, that people want to read, to be perfectly honest. Like in terms of if you're trying to get someone into the Irish language, if you're trying to inspire young people in particular to read in the language and to see it as a living language and something that they can enjoy rather than have to endure, you can't be sending them back to the likes of Peg, and you can't be sending them back to novels and things like that are and being brutally honest, of little interest to them. And they might be of interest to them later on in life, but they're not of interest to them at a particular point. And comics in particular, as a literary tool, as a way of teaching people how to read and how to embrace reading, are so very good. And we're very lucky over the last number of years that there's been a number of efforts to translate a number of popular books and popular comics into Irish. So Asterix is available in Irish. Quarto Maltese by Hugo Pratt is available in Irish. So having some, and now the most latest was Scott Pilgrim. Scott Pilgrim
did us down the hall here, straight down. You'll see them, glider,
yeah. But it's one of those things where, for a long time, that wasn't there. Like it's very interesting when you look back on the history of the state's ability, or the state's efforts to promote the Irish language. At the very inception of the state, they actually put a lot of money into translating what were the popular books at the time. Mm-hmm. So there's an Irish language version of Dracula. There's an Irish language version of The War of the Worlds, but after that, it kind of stagnated for a bit. So as someone who has an interest in that and complains about the fact that, say, like the likes of T.J. Carr have translated and done Irish language versions of the entirety of Avatar: The Last Airbender, or all the DC shows that Andrea would have worked on back in the day, those are all available in Irish somewhere in T.J. Carr's archives. But can you find them? Can you access them? No. But imagine if those kind of resources were available there for kids learning Irish today. Like you told them you can go off and you can go and watch Avatar, Oscuelga. Like that'd be such a huge resource. But it's not there. So when you came to it with the idea of like, oh, but we can do flash forward, I was like, okay, I've been interested from a translator, but also like having my experience in comics, I thought that like, well, it's better me than someone else. I think that at least I'll be able, as someone who has experienced writing comics as well, I'll be able to approach it with those two backgrounds in mind and give it a fair go at the very least.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's, as Gary was saying, the approach that we're taking is Dan is doing an amazing job. So if you want to read the original English, that's widely available on comicskingdom.com. That's the official King Features website. And you can read each one weekly for free. Or you can buy out a subscription and you're guaranteed access to the back catalogue and the whole shebang, like thousands and thousands of strips. Dan's doing an amazing job because sometimes traditionally in the comic strip, you would do a daily, which is, let's say, 4 panels or so, and it's a one-line strip. And then you have the Sunday, which would actually be typically a separate strip because not everyone would get the newspaper on the Sunday. It would be different people only buying the Sunday. So it would break the continuity. One of the rare exceptions to the rule was the Spider-Man strip, which Stan Lee was involved with right up until the end, but it was actually ghostwritten by Roy Thomas, and his brother Larry, who co-created Iron Man with him, Larry Lieber, was the artist on it, but it was actually Alex Savick who goes through it and became the labelled artist, like the titled artist at the end. They would have the Sunday strip the same as the daily strip, and I always found that weird because that was reprinted in the Evening Herald here, and I'd read Spider-Man, and then every Monday I'd be like, I feel like something's missing, the stories just jumped a good bit. But as you can see, what we have is like a double on a Sunday. What Dan does is he recaps the week. So the Echo in Tallaght, the Tallaght Echo newspaper is a weekly newspaper every Thursday. So we went back, started from strip 1, and then we can reprint it. Then each strip is a Sunday strip. And what's great is you can have basically 3 satisfying installments of Flash Gordon, Oscuelga. Then you have the Phantom, Oscuelga, and then you have Popeye as well. And recently, we've been doing an abbreviated Popeye strip, just the stand one, because that does self-contained, so we could use for some of it for advertising, for upcoming masterclasses and such with the Academy. But we'd be reverting back to a full program, full page. A lot of people were wondering, like, why take this format? So myself and Gary collaborate in this in a manner that I act as liaison with King Features, arrange the files, and de facto collaborator, publisher with the Echo, the newspaper's the final publisher. Robin Jones, who we'd be lost without because he's the guy who takes the files and letters each week for us. So he makes the file ready to go. And then we have Hal Loren, who is the guy who formats the page. Now, when we did the original page format, I'd asked Cormac Hughes, who had done the Phantom Origin strip, which we reprinted in the first go. I was saying just stack each one. You think you would take like each strip and stack it, but apparently format of the page didn't allow that. It was irregular shapes. So what Hal has to do then is after Rob finishes the lettering, Hal goes in and reformats the page. So we have a little bit of a bleed. He does this great job where he adds a solid purple background to break up the Phantom. So to your eye, you can kind of break up as you go. At one stage, we started a week late. For when we were originally going to run, because the Echo said, well, we can only fit 2 strips, and I was like, no, we're doing 3. It's 3 or nothing, but I'm glad we did, because we've kept the weekly schedule. There's been like unforeseen circumstances and other elements where it's always been touch and go with stuff, and it is an intense schedule. Although it's like 1 strip a week, it does involve, like, everyone has very busy professional lives, and it takes us a while to get together. We're a week ahead, for a rare occasion, so I touch wood, long way continue,
No.
Yeah, this is it, but it's been good. And there's been times as well where Hal will come in and guest letter and stuff and all when something might need to squeeze by. But what's fantastic is we have weekly comic book content now. 30,000 readers are meant to be. It's the Echo's maximum reach. I think we're probably looking at closer now, maybe 6,000. But they have 30k on the website. But even then, regardless of the readership, it's a substantial amount that we're getting into doorsteps. You go to the Square Shopping Centre or other markets, it's there, and it's allowed me to revisit some characters like the Phantom and Popeye was great. I even did a short Popeye strip in Ashgale, because it's similar like the Flash one. So Gary is just before the recording seen his work in print for the first time with Flash Gordon translation, and this is what you said was your favourite one. It was the 90th anniversary special where you see each and every version of a Flash from the beginning, so you get to see every version, animated, live action.
Sam Joe. It's a that was one of my favorite ones, because one in terms of the format and like using the comic format itself. I thought it was one of the examples of like where Dan was just knocking it out of the park and really kind of hitting on what makes comics unique in general. There's also a selfish part of it in that the very first Flash Gordon strip ran on the 7th of January, 1934. I was born on the 7th of January
1934.
1993, 1934. Yes, I'm looking very good for 90. So I think in some ways kind of appropriate that I came to do some work on Flash Gordon, because we both share a birthday. But yeah, the 90th anniversary was this year. So one of the things that Dan wanted to do was really have a storyline that celebrated that and allowed him to kind of explore those different iterations and those different universes. And when I see this strip, I see the version of Flash that I grew up with from the 90s in there, alongside the Sam Jones version that many other people grew up with. And I think that's just a nice thing to have. That this kind of character who can go through the generations, and the version that your grandparents might be familiar with is different from your version, but there's a continuity there. And there's a continuity of ideas and themes at the very least. So I think Dan captured that very, very well with this strip and with this series as a whole, which has been kind of ultimate Flash Gordon in a way. It's kind of like going back to the beginning, but giving slight spins on the characters and their stories while still keeping true to the theme and the core ideas.
They introduced a new character called Bok, which is a dragon man, but it's also based on the original Raymond strip. So like it's adding to the story without having to retcon anything. But truly, with it's been very good. I'm really impressed. And I'm an avid comic strip reader, and I have to say the pacing is phenomenal. Like Dan really gets a lot in. I had to laugh. Did you read last Sunday's strip? Yeah, it's literally just monsters growling, and at the end they said Flash Gordon, and I was like, it's gonna be a great one. Anything with it. I was like, we just run. Then I see the caption box.
The caption that's the only thing we'll have to do. It'll be great.
Yeah, I was like, cheers, Dan. Appreciate you.
That's a free week right there.
So yes, no, it's been. And then, do you regret that we didn't call it Splunk?
No, as much as like Splunk as the Irish for Flash, like it wouldn't have the same, because like when we think of Flash, in Flash Gordon, it's clearly like it's meant to be someone who's flashy or someone who's fast or things like that. But that's not really what Splunk means. Like it's a camera flash, really, is what it is, right? So it wouldn't exactly work. And I think like trying to communicate, oh no, but it's Flash Gordon, but it's Splunk. Like wouldn't have the same. Wouldn't have the same, impact.
You did a great job with Ming, though. So we didn't change anyone's name, because there's no point changing names, because that's the characters known by. It's the same way when you read like Batman in Irish or something, it's still going to be Batman.
Batman is Batman.
Yeah. And then, but with Ming, you have Ming the Merciless, but the Merciless then were kind of like, okay, there's room there, and you went all the way back to try, because Merciless in Irish wasn't direct translation, but without mercy then was...
It's Nav Trocruk, right? And that would have worked. Ming Nav Trocruk or Ming Nav Trocra would have been fine. But like, part of the power of Ming the Merciless as a name is you've got the alliteration. So I really, really wanted to keep the alliteration if I could. And because we had some lead time for the very first strip, and I knew like a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of getting the terminology and the vocabulary right was going to be in that kind of first strip, because they're throwing proper nouns at you everywhere. Sky City, the Hawkmen and all that. So you've got to find what the Irish equivalents to those are. And so like I knew I had time to kind of look into trying to find what's the best version. And I was prepared to accept Nav Trocruk if I had to. But I went back and I looked through some of the old kind of folklore books I had and consulted with colleagues and friends who would be very, very familiar with that. It's like, is there any way, like is there any way we can get it alliteration? Because like one of the ways you can make something a negative in Irish is to talk about it as being me or V, but I couldn't find in any of the dictionaries, even the older ones, any example of that being used for without mercy or merciless. But we went back to see, by going back through some of the folklore, we found examples, because like you also rarely get kind of titles like that in Irish. But we managed to go find an example of it being used in a similar way. So I was like, okay, it's been used in a similar way. I'm happy enough to accept that and say that that's something we can go with. And so we came up with Ming the Mithrócra. And I was delighted that we got there, because it just is like, I got my alliteration, and perhaps the ADHD in me was just happy, or the OCD in me was happy with that as well. But I think that like, it's when you like, these characters that like have such powerful and stark names. If you have to change it, you want to give something that's an equivalent and really kind of has that same effect. So I think we did that Ming in the end.
Yeah, and it was great. It was a nice touch. It was a chef's kiss moment with it.
No one cares except me, but I'm happy, and that's all that matters.
I really did like it when you see it. I like the alliteration. It's like because I wouldn't have thought of it. I don't think anyone would have. But then once you see it and once you know it's there, I'm like, I'm really happy now that we have the situation.
Yeah.
But no, it's been great. It's been a real experience. The partnership that we have, so we license this from Kingfisher Syndicate, but we give it to the Echo for free, and the Echo don't pay us back. They're just donating the page to the Academy. So we're actually, basically, the Academy loses money by running the strip every week, because we're just pumping out, and then those who translate and letter and stuff, everyone's being paid contribution as well. But what we are doing is we're building to a new project called Task Force, TASQ, named for the Academy. And what it will do is it will feature Flash Gordon, Phantom and Popeye, but it will also include Hagar the Horrible. It will also include Dennis the Menace, the US version, Mandrake the Magician. We will also have Prince Valiant as well, yeah, and Slylock Fox, which is a new strip, but that's like fun activities for kids to try and like spot the difference. I don't even just kids, I do it myself. Sometimes to spot the difference is really, really difficult. Look up Slylock Fox, trust me. Look it up. Yeah. Look up the spot the difference in Slylock Fox. I kid you not. It sounds like it's you do it, and then it's like, oh my god, the guy finds some minute detail to the point you think it's like, they're setting me up there. They're about the same, but we're going to have a huge anthology, and they're going to be reprint material, but also bonus material. So our goal and aspiration is to add in some like content page, which would probably feature, let's say, Phantom or Flash, just something that's bonus to build into it, and maybe some stuff like a cutaway, the Skull Cave at Phantom's HQ as well, that Hal's already done, that we have like locked in the vault, ready to go. But in addition to it, we want to do original strips. So we're preparing material, but we also just need to build up an audience, and we need to build up a customer base. Because as I said, there's the overheads to meet. Now, why do the strips at all? Why incur this, and how does it fit into the Academy? Simply put, if you want to study to be a comic book artist or a sequential artist, the Academy is not on any academic framework. We're non-accredited, because I'm not focusing on the accreditation. I'm focusing on getting you into industry. So what I can turn around and say to you is, hey, I want you to work on this Flash Gordon project for your portfolio, this Popeye project for your portfolio, this Phantom project for your portfolio, and we could share your work. Both original, ideally I see the comic page in the Echo becoming more towards original content as well, so student original shorts as well, and transitioning out and rotating in, so you have a platform. So that's where we're coming from. Online. The Academy. Yeah. So we offer both. So the Academy offers both online and in-person delivery. So if you can't make it to Tala, then what we'll do is we deliver on Zoom. And for instance, we have an upcoming masterclass, and Dre Romano next week's doing an in-person voiceover class. And Kevin Eastman in October is going to do one online. So he's going to come in. And you have a choice. You can do, a full semester with us online. And since lockdown, I've been delivering that like animation through online, so I've developed the technology and stuff for it. Now, the only caveat with online is that you have to provide your own equipment, like laptops and stuff and all. But if it's in person, we can provide you with all the necessary tools. So that's reflected in the price, basically, in what we do in that instance. Now, so if you want to help support the future of the strips, if you like to know more, then I encourage you to visit lightningstrikecomics.com, or you can visit us at tasqart.com. But if you follow Lightning Strike Comics, our online store will direct you to Task Force, which is the new anthology. And for €30, you can buy a year subscription, and you have all the strips gathered and sent to you via email. And we also have an annual that would be printed. So there is a printed annual coming in, so you'll see Gary's work in print as well outside the newspaper, and that's where we hope to have some bonus material.
Yay!
So we're doing the best we can at the moment, and it's been a real experience. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you guys some material on the screen. So I'm going to take the microphone for a second just to talk you guys through, show you some stuff, show you some links. Then I'm going to come back here. I'm just going to put a spotlight then onto Gary's projects then as well outside of what we're doing here. Okay, so just real quick. So first image you're going to see here, and for the audio audience, we're just going through a couple of slides. You want to see what I'm showing, visit Tasquart, TASQART.com, and you see the same material there. Here's the partnership with the Echo, and here you see the Phantom, Popeye, Olive Oil, and Flash Gordon. In terms of the company structure and stuff, myself, the organisation is Macaulay Consultancy, and I was the founding publisher of Light and Strike Comics. But now, as you can see, the goal is for the Academy to feed into the publishing arm. The reason for that is so that if you're a student at the Academy, you can sell your work, and that work then will reimburse you for your tuition and stuff. Not even just licensed IP, but original. So we're giving you that platform. Our track record then is with the Echo newspaper. So there's just a couple of the Echoes, coming in. As we said, we're coming up closely to half a year now of the content that we're producing. Here is the photograph of our very first one in print. And I'll show you some more of the Flash Gordon strip of what Gary's translations as well. The centerpiece is an original origin strip that Cormac Hughes did for us for the Phantom as well. And here we have the Flash Gordon strip. So to the left is the original one by Dan in English, and to the right then is the translation that you can see. I love this one, Gary, where you have like the rogue planet Mongo, and then Mongo on planet Braddock. Is that it?
Like
it's fantastic.
Language is different, so you have to adapt to make it sense. There's some things you can approximate fairly well, and then some things you've got to go for understanding, like comprehension more so than strict accuracy.
It's brilliant. It's just brilliant. Like you've done, like sometimes you get some real curveballs thrown, and you adapt so well with the language. It's brilliant to see. And not to neglect our other characters. So the Phantom is also a character we're heavily associated with. So as I said, I mentioned earlier on, the 80th anniversary, you can see here to the left of the screen is what our first publication with the Phantom. That was a Dublin Comic Con exclusive that we did. That was back in 2016. Recently, Egmont reprinted Mask of the Phantom. Mask of the Phantom. Mask of the Phantom, which was illustrated by Mike Collins and written by Harold Wernes as well, who's based in Norway, and then Egmont in Sweden recently purchased it via Norway and retranslated it. So we did the original English, then it was translated into Norwegian, and now it's translated into Sweden. So it's just recently published, and that was by Egmont in association with Light and Strike. And we have upcoming projects as well with Frew, and we have another American publisher as well. He's going to, hopefully, we're looking at having the entire Phantom collection in trade paperback that we've done with Light and Strike. So everything seems to be going green, but I'm just waiting to give you guys the good word. And then, of course, Popeye. So Popeye has a really interesting character history, because many of you know him from the cartoon, but he originally appeared as a backup character in Timble Theatre. He was not the main character. Olive Oil's main boyfriend was Ham Gravy, and then Popeye, just as a side character, appeared. People loved him. Then he found his way into radio, and then he found his way into animation. And of course, the Fleischers, like Max and Dave Fleischer, really brought new life to him, who also were the first ones to depict Superman on screen as well with the animated series. I was very fortunate to recently be at Malta Comic Con as a guest last year, and while that's where they filmed the Robin Williams Popeye film, and they kept the set. And the set, which you can see in the centre, is turned into a theme park now, and they have a Popeye museum there and a statue to Robin Williams in his performance of Popeye as well. So literally, this is before we did the strip. This is in March, and then we came out in April. So I think I was flying back from Lisbon at the time. I was it was either Lisbon or Malta. Probably getting mixed up onto it, but like it was just a couple of weeks, and next thing, a year within going to Popeye Village, next thing I'm publishing Popeye. And this is the only time Popeye spoke in Australia. It was with myself. I guessed it on this one, so the grammar and spelling might be questionable on this one. And this is Task Force, folks. So this is the cover. Now this one I drew myself actually, and it was we just kept it a style guide, not too fancy onto it. But you can expect this to be released digitally, and then thereafter to be 1 book a year in print, and it will be featuring all the strips that we've shown you there as well, and some bonus material. If you'd like to know more, that's Lightning Strike Comics. So this is the publishing arm of it. So we have an online store. If you find Task Art, TASQART, you'll find out more about us there as well. And I just kindly request to consider supporting the strips by purchasing an online subscription. So, big capitalist that I am, going to leave that as the last slide. So I can come back to Gary then, and thanks very much everyone for your attention there. That pretty much concludes where we are with the strip side of things. And as I said, there's more coming. Myself and Gary are back and forth all the time in conversation. We're just going slow and steady with what we're doing at the minute, not announcing or getting ahead of ourselves, but expect far more announcements coming down the pipeline.
Scheming. There's a lot of scheming.
A lot of scheming going on. But let's just switch around to the other side of where you are now with Mad Cave and Limit Break. And where would you like to start, Gary?
I suppose the beginning is normally the appropriate place to start. I remember I met Owen very shortly after moving to Dublin, and at the same time and this had been about 2017, and at that time I'd started, really wanting to commit myself to writing comics and to creating comics. I'd been somebody who loved comics all their life, and I'd always, been, tangentially involved in comics. I wrote for a lot of websites and did like reviews and interviews and stuff. And I had been involved with a project that the Cork City Library had done at one point, their graphic novel project, which they do every year, which takes groups of teenagers from schools all around the county and gets a group of writers and groups of artists, teams them up, and they produce an anthology. So I knew that as much as I loved writing and I loved prose and things like that, I really wanted to give comics writing a go. And having moved to Dublin, I suddenly had, and having finished college and now on my first job properly, I suddenly had the time to do it, and I had the funds to be able to, fund my own comics, find artists, collaborate with them, pay them a decent rate to produce them, and just put them out there and see what happens. And that led to me appearing and me going along to a small press day event in 2017. And it was at that small press day that I met Garrett Luby and Paul Carroll, who I would later go on to found Limit Break Comics with. And essentially at that small press day event, there's panels like this, load of panels like this about how you make comics, the art, craft of it, what it takes from both production and the artistic side of things. So I came away from that event being like, okay, I want to be tabling at that event next year. I want to be at that event with my own book. And having met Garrett and Paul at the event, we went for drinks afterwards, we became fast friends, and we kind of committed ourselves to, they had been tabling there, but they hadn't many comics. They had, comic art, and they had, zines and stuff, but they hadn't any collected comics or any short stories. So we teamed up on the basis that, a rising tide will raise all the ships, and be like, okay, we're going to work together to try to put together our books. We can support each other, and if I'm at a con and they're not, I can bring their books and things like that. And we can also just keep each other honest and keep each other in check and make sure that we're actually producing work rather than just messing around the place. And so we formed Limit Break Comics, and I'm happy to say, at that next small press day event, we were there and we launched our first 2 books. One of those being Mixtape, which was a collection of short stories that I had done over the preceding year. And so since then, I'd been kind of chipping away at comics. I'd do short stories, I would do one-shots, but I really wanted to pitch books to the American comic market. I wanted an original series, because one, I kind of knew that I wasn't going to be able to do that myself, in terms of just the time, the resource, things like that. So I wanted to pitch an original series. I wanted to pitch it to the US. And so one of my collaborators from those early days, from those early short stories, a guy called Daniel Romero, he and I had stayed in contact. We were constantly working on different short stories, and we just gelled creatively. We had the same storytelling sensibilities. We liked the same kind of things. And we committed that, if either of us had an idea that we thought had legs and thought could go places, that we would work on it together. And one day after having my first experience playing D&D with a bunch of friends of mine, I came up with the idea for When the Blood Has Dried, which is my debut series in the American market with Mad Cave Studios. And the essential pitch of that being, you know, a high fantasy spaghetti western. That's a bit like if you combined Unforgiven with Baldur's Gate. And it was about this retired adventurer who had spent their life adventuring, but really realised that, you know, that was a life of violence, that they were involved in some unsavoury things, and it wasn't really something that they wanted to be in anymore. But, you know, as we often see in those kind of things, you know, it's easy to get in, it's very hard to get out. And having managed to escape with her life barely, she retires to a small town, very much like the small towns you would encounter in Ireland, and sets up shop there as a barkeep. Only for her past, inevitably, as it has to, because there's a story to be told, that past coming knocking on the door. And I was very, very lucky. I'd been aware of Mad Cave for a number of years because they ran an annual talent search competition where they would, you know, solicit, for very rarely for comic companies, you know, solicit scripts, you know, and solicit, you know, artwork from newer creators. And they, for the first time, opened up their submissions generally to creator-owned work. And it just so happened that Daniel and I had been working on this book for a year or so at that point. We had developed a lot of concept art. We had the first script done, but we also had a number of pitch pages ready to go. And so when that opportunity came up, I was like, I'm going for it. I'm just going to throw it in. Probably nothing will come of it, but I'd rather give it a shot. And I was very, very lucky to hear back a number of weeks later from Mike Martz, who's the editor-in-chief at Mad Cave, saying that they were interested in publishing it. And so that was in late 2022, and throughout 2023, we worked on When the Blood Has Dried and getting it ready. And then we're very, very lucky to have it published this year, and it just finished up its run this week. It's 5-issue run. So it's been a journey. Like it's one of those things where it's like, oh, it's an overnight success, but it's a 10-year overnight success.
That's the
No, nothing ever is. And my friend Alex Saviuk was at New York Comic Con and he sketched and signed, and someone came and asked for a commission. And when they came back about an hour or so back, he had it done. And they went, wow, that was so fast. And they were like, how long do you think that took? And I was like, what, an hour, 2 hours? And I was, it's 24 years career right there. That's what that was, you know. But yeah, no, that's brilliant. And how have you found navigating the American market then at the moment? How's that been for you? Particularly because, you know, you have a pro pass for New York Comic Con.
Yeah.
So you're going to be there in October. But being on, you know, in different time zone and everything, how's that been, you know, work both professionally in terms of working with your collaborators, with your editors, and I suppose from the emotional side as well when you look at it?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the creative side of things, I think it actually works out quite well for people who are in Ireland and those who are in the US, because the time zones, for the most part, it's only like 6 or 7 hours between them. So oftentimes, you know, it's the end of your business day as it's the start of their business day. So that can work out quite well in that, you know, you're finishing up your work that day, and then you can send over the script and they've just started. So it means in terms of getting edits back or getting comments back, it can happen very quickly. So it means that, you know, when you're ready to start the next day, you've got everything you need. So I think it actually can work quite well for that, and can also work well for that from deadline perspectives, making sure that, you know, you're as you should be, and as thankfully, you know, most Irish creators are known for keeping their deadlines. But I think that helps in that area. In terms of promotion, things like that, it can sometimes make organising interviews a bit more difficult, because you got to make sure you find a time that actually works for everyone. But for the most part, I found that, you know, like the podcast, you know, circuit and the comics press, you know, are very accommodating those things. You know, a lot of this is done, and have it as someone who worked in that previously, is done from a passion basis. You know, there is not a lot of money in the comics press, and you know, that is something that, you know, no one is afraid to talk about, because, you know, it's very well known. So like, you know, you appreciate the time that these people put in to, you know, sit down with you, have a chat about your work, read your work, and you comment on it, because there's so many books coming out every month. You know, from Marvel, DC, bigger hitters, from bigger names, you know. And both myself and Daniel were coming into When the Blood Has Dried as, you know, two new creators who really no one had heard of prior to this. You know, I had obviously done a number of years working in small press on stuff for Limit Break and stuff for other smaller publishers. But, you know, a lot of times you have this perception going in that, oh, I'll do all this work and that will get me the opportunity. Someone will see my book, someone will see that, and they'll be like, we want you, and give you an opportunity to pitch. But what I found in my experience was that doing that work is what made me ready to seize the opportunity when it came. So while it wasn't the case, that, Mad Cave had not seen my work prior to this. They didn't. It wasn't the case that Mike Martin rang me up saying, "Oh, we saw that story you did. We'd like you to pitch something." It's the fact that I had done those 5 years of work meant that my craft was at the stage, at the level that it was ready for when they came to me and then said, "Would you like to publish this with us?" So there's that side of things as well. But I found for the most part, the experience of working with Mad Cave, as a publisher, they're very, very supportive and they're great champions and advocates for the book and have been since day one. And when it came to organising interviews or ensuring that the press got their copies, there was no messing about with that. It was always very, very, very good and very clean. And it meant that we could give the book the best shot that it had. And I did quite a number of interviews for When the Blood Has Dried, and one of the most gratifying parts about the experience was because oftentimes when you're creating, you're throwing things into a vacuum, but people who, and I would sit down with chats for people, whether it was over email or when it was in a podcast, just being people who, it was every time I was just struck by, it was people who had read the book, understood what we were doing, and really liked what we were trying to achieve it, and being able to have a mature and interesting conversation about the themes of the book, craft of the book, and that was one of the most gratifying experiences of it for me, along with making sure that the world knows Daniel Romero is an amazing artist, and we were lucky as well to have an amazing cover artist in Marco Rudy, who, a more experienced creator, really I think gave the book a boost in that people would see the covers and go, "Oh, that's amazing."
And when's the Irish version coming out?
Don't tempt me. Don't because so much about When the Blood Has Dried is also trying to give an Irish spin, an Irish tone to high fantasy, a genre that has been dominated by Tolkien and the British tradition. So then there's a lot of Irish in the When the Blood Has Dried, from the place names to the character names to various bits and bobs like that. But maybe we'll have to see. We'll see how well Flash does. Then I'll make the business case to Mad Cave then about why we shouldn't.
Yeah. And Mad Cave, ironically, have the Flash Gordon license as well. They're doing original content there as well. It's the year of Flash at the moment, and Defenders as well.
Yeah, well, it's the 90th anniversary, so it makes sense that there'd be a big push. So Mad Cave have been very, very good in their own original material, which is has started up very, very recently. But they're alongside their ongoing series, they've got Defenders of the Earth, and then they also have the Flash Gordon Quarterly as well. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there, and I think it's I think it's quite timely that this Dan's strip has been running for is coming up to a year now.
Yeah, it'll
be coming up to a year. So it's very much there's a resurgence. I think people are kind of really getting why Flash became the inspiration for other kind of traditional superhero characters, because Flash predates Batman, predates Superman, and you can see in Flash those kind of early traditions and those early themes that would be explored later in Superman and other characters like that. So it's been really, really cool, and I just found it quite funny that when you came to me with the Flash with the Flash opportunity, I was like, oh well, I'm talking to Bad Cave, they've got Flash too.
It is crazy, and I have to say, Dan is just brilliant. It's one of the most engaging, interesting, exciting strips out there at the moment. He's really captured the energy. It's a real gift with what Dan has. They're doing great work. I highly recommend it. Trust me, it would only take a minute of your time each day to read, but it's an easy routine with a smartphone to keep, and you won't be disappointed. So seek out the Flash Gordon strip, but if you would like to support us as well, indicate massive QR code to Sickles. More than happy to hear from you guys again. So listen, we're going to wrap up here now. Before we do, Gary, where can folks follow and send hate mail to you?
They can go to info@taskart. No, so I'm on all the social media platforms, even though they are crumbling around us at the seams. So I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, Blue Sky, and if you look up Gary Moloney, you're likely to find me. You can find When the Blood Has Dried in all good comic shops, and the trade paperback will be coming out in mid-November. So you can order that. If you missed the series in single issues, You can order that through either your local bookshop or your local comic shop. And Limerick Break Comics are still on the go. We're still producing anthologies on a yearly basis. So we are tabling here at Dublin Comic Con, but our next big project is called Wish Upon a Star, and it's coming to Kickstarter on the 18th of September. It's the latest in our mythology anthologies. So for the last number of years, we've been doing open call anthologies where creators from all around the world pitch us stories. We started with 40 people submitting, and we ended with our last submission pool with 300 submissions.
Wow.
We only have space for 20 stories per anthology, really. So like that will give you a thing of like how much work there is in like sifting through and, you know, narrowing down from a very talented pool of creators. But this year we're shifting away from classic mythology and going to more modern mythology. So we're looking at fairy tales, but we're doing fairy tales with a spin, because all our stories in Wish Upon a Star are going to be fairy tales with a far future twist. So far future science fiction fairy tales. We've got a wonderful cover by Nate Stockman and Deacon Huff, and we'll be going to Kickstarter for that in mid-September. So people can follow us on Kickstarter, follow the campaign now, or they can go to limitbreakcomics.com where they can follow all of our projects, including Wish Upon a Star.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thanks very much, everyone. Next talk will start at 3:30. I'm going to end the recording here. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to use the internet network. The next class will be the last one. It's a master class with Mark Russell. So Mark Russell is originally going to deliver a master class with the Academy called From Pitch to Publish. And he's going to use his own examples of like how he successfully pitched to the major studios. Now, originally the Academy here was going to co-host Mr. Frank Miller, and then there was a reschedule. So Mark was very gracious in allowing us to reschedule him into DCC, because I just want to point out, like Dublin Comic Con, this show in particular, really does a lot of programming for comic books. Like you can go to other major shows and there is like an artist alley and such, but in terms of portfolio reviews, workshops, portfolio reviews, this is only the few left in the country, you know, that have Comic Con the name and holds up to the comic part of it, you know. And long may it continue. So if anyone has a serious interest in breaking into industry, 3:30, cannot stress enough, if you can make it in for that, that's going to be perhaps I would say one of the biggest talks we've done here. It's just, and not knowing it else, like, to put it in perspective, Mark has a Batman book and an X-Men book out at the same time. Like, you can't argue with that, you know?
Yeah, and Fantastic Four Life Story appears to be partially the basis for the Fantastic Four film that's coming out soon, and that was another Mark Russell joint, so
he's got that Marvel money. Let's get him, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, and hopefully see you all again soon. Thank you, and thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Now joining me will be Rob Corley behind Atomic Diner. Atomic Diner is one of the oldest Irish comic publishers in the country. Rob is also the proprietor behind Subsidy Comics. You may have visited some of the shops on Dublin City off Mary Street, or it could have been in Galway as well. Rob actually joins us halfway through this particular segment, in which we're talking about a modern retelling of the Children of Lair story called Lair, L-I-R-R, which was written by the late great Richmond Clements. Sadly, since this recording was made in August of last year, Richmond sadly passed away. Richmond was one of the very first collaborators I worked with when breaking into comics over a decade ago with the Lightning Strike Presents anthology. During this period of time of producing comics, we had the Brian Boru strip, which Richmond wrote. It was illustrated by Cormac Hughes. It was coloured by Vicky Stonebridge, and also equally sadly it was illustrated by Richmond's friend Dave Bolt One, as he was known to many, who was also sadly passed away. This particular story was also illustrated by fellow storyteller Paul J. Bulger. Now, Paul has been a huge name in both the animation and comic scenes in Ireland for a good while. You may have picked up his book Hound, which was recently re-released by Dark Horse Comics in the US. Or perhaps you may have checked out the latest Wallace and Gromit to hit screens just last Christmas, in which Paul also worked with Aardman Studios on that. Paul was also one of our lecturers here at the Tallaght Academy of Sequential Art. He delivered a 3-part character design workshop. So join me in this segment will be Paul discussing Lair, and then joining us in the second part will be Rob Cawley. Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining us here again today. My name is Owen Macaulay. I am the Academy President behind Tallaght Academy of Sequential Art at Taskart. Throughout this weekend we're delivering a series of panels, workshops and masterclasses. We're halfway through our programming already today, and we're kicking things off with a conversation of the children of Lair. Joining us here today is the author, Paul Bulger. Actually, artist, sorry, as a co-author. That's probably question one, co-author, because we were just speaking just before the recording. You've produced this in association with Richard Clemens. So just a little bit about that collaboration to begin. How did this project start, Paul?
Well, I've had the idea for years. There's a story in Waterford where I live about a hermit who lived in the mountains who came back from World War One. He's a real guy. And I always wanted to make a book about that. But when I found out that poor guy really had no story, he was just this poor guy that lived in the mountains and he suffered from PTSD. But it still stayed with the idea of a hermit, of a guy living, with animals or whatever, like this weird character. And but I didn't know what to do with it. I was doing the Hound comic and time was short. So I went to Thought Bubble. We were testing Hound in different Comic Cons about 10 years ago, and we were seeing would Cuchulainn work as a comic or whatever. So I had a few pages of that done, and I met Richmond at Thought Bubble. We just hit it off, just started chatting. So I told him about this. And one of the aspects of the story, because it's set in 1940, so it's set when Ireland was neutral in World War II, sorry, and the Blitz had just kicked off in England. And my idea was, what would it be like if a little girl was sent here for safety away from the bombing to Irish grandparents, but she met this strange character that lives out there and he helps her, she helps him. So that was the basic idea of the story. It wasn't even the Lair thing yet. It was just the idea of two outsiders. So then I kind of hit on the idea, well, what if he thinks he's Lair and he's other? So I said to Rich, look, the history of Ireland is complex. The mythology can be even more complex. So he's from the north, I'm from the south. There's a couple of times in our history where north and south have come together, usually under a British flag, for good or bad, to fight in their wars or whatever. And one of those wars was where you had northern and southern people under a British flag fighting for the army, right? And him being from the north and me being from the south, I thought he might bring an interesting aspect from people, northern Protestant, and I'm supposedly southern Catholic. I'm not, but I'm from the south. So we looked at it and said, well, we can't just do a simple A to Z story. So the complexity was immediately thrown up. And I think what Rich brought through was the really interesting take on his ancestors' part in that history. I brought what I thought was interesting from my ancestors' part, which was none. We didn't join up and fight, although a few of my friends' great-grandfathers might have. So out of that then, we sat down. He lives in Scotland, I live in Waterford in the southeast. So there was a lot of back and forth with emails. COVID hit then. But before COVID hit, there was a treatment that we had worked up. But then I really went into it and started to break it down. And I went through a very tight, strict script writing process that Rich would come in and, he'd go, what about this, what about that? So really it was like a kind of international tennis through email, But it started, I think, because I really felt like this thing can't just be always from the southern point of view. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he was from the north, I thought, brought an interesting aspect. And the fact that we hit it off was great.
And to bring it back then to just your origin story as well to the Irish comic book industry, because we're going to record this, we're going to put this out. A couple of listeners might be stateside as well. And you dropped a lot of knowledge on us there, particularly with regards to Cuchulainn. Yeah. So in terms, who here is familiar with the legend and the myth of Cuchulainn? Yeah, kind of. So yeah, awesome. That's great to hear. With regards to that particular story, that's his, that's our Greek myth, for one way to translate.
He's our Achilles, our Lancelot.
Exactly. Yeah. So you've worked on. So you mentioned Hound. So Hound is probably what you've perhaps been the most known for with regards to in the Irish comic book industry. So what led to the transition to the Irish comic book industry? Your career trajectory. You also have an experience and background in animation. So just a little bit about yourself then.
Well, I started working in animation in 1987. Mm-hmm. I worked for Don Bluth and I worked on Land Before Time, All Dogs Go to Heaven. And for the last nearly 35 years, I've been I've owned animation studios, I've directed, I've produced films, I've done storyboards, I worked with Shaun the Sheep. The list is ridiculously long. I just make a living. And I work on stuff. Well, lately is if I like it, but a lot of times you get a job and it's usually good fun. So I've worked on a lot of different stuff. We had Clark's. We had our own studio here in Dublin in the 90s, and we worked on some European features. So I've always wanted to try and do Cullen, that particular legend, as an animated film, actually. And in the late 90s, I almost got it made, and it didn't happen. And then about 4 or 5 years later, Lord of the Rings had come out, 300 had come out, and I said, oh, well, that might be a cool live action movie. So we tried that. That didn't happen. Films, they're always, you work on 100 and one gets made, or you develop 100. So what happened, I had all these drawings and designs, and the guy I was working with had won an Oscar, and he'd done a few things with animation, so we thought we had some mileage, some leverage, and it didn't lift as fast as we wanted. So I said to him, well, why don't we do it as a graphic novel? Why not do our film script, which I wrote with Barry Devlin, into a comic? Why not take all the storyboards and all that kind of stuff and turn it? But the problem is I very quickly realized that a 120-page film script was, the ratio was 4 pages of comic to 1 page of film script. So now it's a 480-page comic. So we did it, yeah, I know, it's insane. And we did that over 3 years through Kickstarter, and we ran out the 3 volumes. So really I've gone through from animation through back into comics, which I wanted to do originally. I do with the music as well. So I'm kind of around everything. And the idea of Irish comics, for me, it was just, that's a great story. It's only through that actually I became aware of like what Rob was doing, or all the other guys, Declan Chaldy and William Slaney and all these lads. I got to know them and yourself in the last 5 to 10 years, because I was kind of outside of that a bit in the animation world. But since doing Hound, we got it picked up by Dark Horse, which was great, so it went worldwide. But with this book, I didn't really pitch this around. I didn't show it to anybody. You saw it. I showed it to Rob.
I just saw it on, I think it was on your Twitter feed. Then I thought I was imagining it. I got on to it. He was like, where did you see this? And I thought it was a dream, eh?
I thought I deleted it.
That's how you delete it, yeah.
So joining us here now is Robert Coley, who is the publisher behind Atomic Diner Comics, and you would be like you're the granddaddy Irish comics. That'd be
sure I like that. I get the Godfather.
The Godfather, more gravitas.
Time takes its toll, yeah, I guess.
But so you guys it was a chance meet up across social media then, like on the Twitter feeds, and then you're like, hey, we should collab on
a modern love story.
Actually, I'd know Rob from going into the shop. I didn't know him that well. We didn't be chatting. When I'm up in Dublin, I'd call in to have a browse or whatever. But when you emailed me about it, yeah, I think you thought it was going to be like a bit of a dark Hound thing, didn't
I did, because Paul did the Hound, and I'm sure you've seen that, yeah, it was quite dark and
bloody,
yeah. So when you sent me this, I was kind of going, what the is this? This is very, but it was only when my kids looked at it and I thought it was amazing. And I thought, well, yeah, that just made me realize, yeah, it's a different market. Yeah, it's just something different.
To be honest with you, for me, it was just a chance to take a deep breath and not repeat myself, I have that knack or that interest in sort of all ages stuff, having a bit of an animation background, and I wanted something a bit more clear and direct and a lot shorter. This only has 50 pages as opposed to 500, so it was doable. The difference on this one though was I was going to draw it and colour it and letter it, so I kind of did everything on it, and I co-wrote with Rich, and then with Rob and his team, then we designed and put it together. But it was a chance just to try something else.
And is this the hope to do more afterwards as well? Like, do you guys have many irons in the fire? Is that the expression?
Irons in the fire.
We have lots.
Yeah, but it's fun. When we actually sat down and I had all ideas and Paul had ideas, we realised there's, I mean, lots of stuff there.
We have a mutual thing where we just want to see Irish stories told or put out there in a way that might get you to read the I hate to use the word the real stuff, but the original mythology. Mm-hmm. So if ours can be an introduction to characters or stories told in a slightly skewed way, that maybe then you go, oh, okay, so Finn McCool, all right, you've just done one on Finn McCool. Okay, who's this Finn McCool guy? Well, in the comic he's like this, but isn't there another version of that? Okay, I'm going to read that. But that's my feeling, or Cuchulainn. A few people read Hound and they went, oh, it's not exactly the legend. I'm going, yeah, well, there's a million versions of it anyway. Mm-hmm. So,
well, there's no point in doing the exact legend again. Anyone who knows it has already read that.
Exactly.
And then if you want to go and look at the original one, that's there to be looked at.
And I think we have an opportunity like with the Norse mythology or the Japanese do with their stuff or whatever. Take your pick, the Roman stuff. All these characters, Thor. They're all turned into these other type of things through modern media. Not necessarily want to do that, but I think it's a chance for us to explore our culture a bit through a modern medium. That's what appeals to me.
What's really interesting, I often bring up, particularly with my students, is like sequential art, like Irish comics. You go all the way back to the high crosses, like what are they? But just 3D carved images, sequences from the Bible. Recently, we did a 6-week class with Derek Tyler Attico. He did the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, a Deep Space Nine book, a Titan book. It's a prose book. But he was teaching fundamentals of storytelling, and he pointed out about stained glass windows in churches. They were there because people were illiterate, and then they were conveying the story from passages in the Bible. So there's been a rich history of it in the country.
I think it's in the culture of humanity, and we're going back to it. The written word took over from Shakespeare's time, maybe a bit earlier, to the last century, let's call it. But if you look at Aztec culture, Egyptian hieroglyphs, when I was in college, I did a thesis on this actually, and about the use of what we now call sequential art, but telling stories through pictures. And I think the praise, let's say, that the written word was given because there was a kind of an elevation of the mind's eye instead of the real eye.
Mm-hmm.
In the era of enlightenment or whatever, that people really respected literature, and rightly so. And I think pictures were pushed back, particularly comics and animation were seen as children's fare, but that's been dispelled.
Oh yeah,
in the last few years, and will go on to be. But for me, I just think it's a return back to cave paintings and the things that inspired me.
So you're not that old.
I know, but when I looked at them in the books, I used to go, I wish I could draw like that. Look at these people with their hands and sticks, and they're capturing exactly what those animals were like. And that's the story of their day out or that week.
Yeah.
They're going to eat for a month now because they were able to. And somebody was able to go, so what happened, Johnny? Well, I tell you, there was a bloody buffalo on a hill and he ran like a. Yeah, okay, tell me again. And he drew that. And all we're doing today is the same thing, except we're thinking about it and doing it through different medium. But so it's retelling stories in a way. And I wonder sometimes with Irish storytelling, we have this notoriety for being great writers, let's call it, Shakespeare, what's his name, Joyce and all the Shakespeare. He's not writer. You know what I mean?
So we claim Shakespeare, why not?
Shakespeare. Shakespeare. But, all are great writers and all that. So to have a look at something where you could now come up with a way of doing this thing, which we all like, in our way, it's going to find its feet. It's already found it in many ways.
Yeah.
And I think that it's only a matter of maybe the next generations coming up will we need a Will Eisner.
Yeah. But I mean, comics are a great way to do it, to take the mythology and redo it that way.
They are.
Sure, even DC at the moment, looking at their own mythology and redoing it with the Absolute project they're doing.
Tell me about that.
It's really interesting. They're looking at here's what we're doing and then how to, evolve that into the next one. For yourself, Rob, so you've been with, Atomic Dynamite, so much you've offered the first-time publishing opportunities to so many in the country, like Declan Shalvey, Stephen Mooney, Will Sliney, even Nick Roach.
No, Nick actually never did that.
No. Collectively, I think I would have just put...
No, he was around just a little bit after that, but I never actually got to work with him, unfortunately.
But so much is, in what you've seen, so now, obviously, there's the Irish invasion going on in Irish comics these days. You even have, later on Sunday, we have Danny Earls, we have Ellie Wright, we have Colm Griffin, we have Ruairí Coleman now. It seems like, as you were saying, that next generation and everything's coming up already. What have been some of the changes you've kind of noticed, just in terms of because there's more now doing it, the technology is more accessible now, but just from publisher and retailer, because you have Subsidy Comics as well, so from publisher and retailer, what is some of the stuff that's exciting you now at the moment?
Well, I mean, when you go back to talking about people like Declan Shalvey and Will Sliney and all that, it was kind of a moment there when I started doing my stuff. It wasn't as accessible for anybody to get in to, the big kind of end of a DC, Marvel. So I guess that was lucky for me, because I was able to offer those guys a place to start. But all the names you mentioned there, I haven't worked with any of them because it's moved on, so they can actually just jump over someone like me and just go straight into it. So it does make it a little bit harder from my point of view to find people. But that's why it was great for myself and Paul to come together. Yeah. Because now we can, start anew.
Yeah, and for me it's like I had worked on a lot of these big American movies and these brand kind of things over the years. And I'd never actually done it with comics. And I don't know if I've ever even sent my portfolio into any of those American publishers, because I kind of got to, I'm a bit older now as well. And, like, I wouldn't mind doing a Batman cover. Who wouldn't like to draw Batman? But I've never chased it. And I think for the people who have made a career, that's amazing that they can do that. But I would love to, like what we're trying to do with this little book and some other stuff, is to try and now put the energy that, with the time I have left, whatever that is, either showing somebody else what I've done if it's of any use, or spend my time trying to make our stories or our characters or new characters we'll invent based on this mythology that we have or this culture that we have. Because again, there's not wrong with all the other stuff, but like you look at Declan and all the lads, they're doing their own characters now, they're doing their own crime stories, they're doing whatever they want, they're creating their own bloody universes and mythologies, which is amazing, but they have the vehicle, which wasn't available. Like back in the 80s when I was a kid in school, to be able to draw, I mean, I think Dermot Powers from Waterford, he does work in Sláine, right? And I didn't know Dermot was from Waterford, and I used to be looking at, so he's from the same area of Ireland as me, but he went over to London and now he's out doing great in films and all that. So what I'm trying to say is there were barriers, like you said, that are not there anymore.
They're not there now.
They were, like in the 80s. There was Jim Fitzpatrick was the one guy that we'll all look at. But Jim really didn't do comics. He did illustrations. So there was nobody from Ireland really doing comics back in the 80s. We did a bunch of underground kind of crazy stuff.
You know what I discovered recently, and shame on me, but the song Grace, who is her husband, one of the signatories of Proclamation, the song Grace is, oh Grace, oh hold me in your arms. I'm going to kick myself later.
It's all the shame, like.
Yeah, it's kind of, but she was actually an Irish cartoonist. She wrote political cartoons, and it's something I just discovered recently. And we know her from the song "Oh Grace," but her husband was one of the signatories in 1960.
See, I think there was a lot of cartoonists here, a lot of illustrators, and a lot of them did great stuff in the States and Europe, doing book illustrations, but nobody really did what we're calling comics or sequential art. There wasn't really that much of that around. There was some underground stuff. Like I said, we did a bunch of stuff in college, and we were doing that old small press through Escape magazine back in the 80s with Paul Gravett, and we'd be mixed up with all that scene. But that all became, in the next 20 years or 30 years since, there's a whole new scene in that. And I had stepped out of that world, and I wasn't living in Ireland, and I came back and I saw these indie comics that were being done. It was brilliant. And so I think I was in an earlier kind of generation that kind of missed the beat. And now in the older age, I'm jumping in again to have a bit of fun with it. But I think that, if you're young and you're good at drawing or telling stories with pictures, there's an opportunity now to do your own stuff, is what I'm saying, as well as the paid job, which could be Iron Man or whatever you're lucky enough to draw.
And transferable skills in general. Transferable skills. There's so much, because as you just mentioned, for your own career, like you've done animation, film, it's all together in.
And like everything feeds into everything, really, and at the end of the day, you could argue like this little book that we've done here is a storyboard for a film, hint, hint.
Put it out there.
So anyway, look, it's comics to me they're like beat boards for movies. They're like the key moments of a film, and you take the key moments and then you can in between it and break it down. And sure, when they made Sin City, didn't what's his name, Rodriguez, just cut the books. He didn't even do a story.
Yeah, even Snyder did the same with the 300 film as well.
Yeah, you just cut it.
And Watchmen. Yeah. But it was a faithful translations in what they did. Like
that's because they took all the key shots, you see. And I think some people make the mistake of not taking those key frames. They go and we were only talking about this earlier, about how they reinvent stuff all the time, and not always in a good way.
Mm-hmm. Actually, they missed the point that these things have become what they are because of the core story.
Yeah, I often have to say to students, like, don't just keep reading, comics and the same stories to inspire yourself. Read widely, go beyond. Like Dark Knight Returns, someone pointed out to me and goes, that's really just opera when you look at it, because it's like it begins at the ordinary level, and then he's suddenly fighting God. So like you're doing an opera, and this it's like it's street crime, then fight with Superman. But you don't realize when you see the beginning and end point, you're like, that's a big jump. But it doesn't feel that way when you read the story. It escalates, and in education, the classics can help you with that.
Big time, and I think if you, like, even with music, if you're just copying copiers, you're just going to be a copy of a copy of a copy. Yeah, you might be a very slick copy, but you're still a copy.
Oh, yeah.
So it'd be nice to have something in what you're trying to do that maybe you'd be inspired by whoever, we're never fully original. What is original? But to be trying your own thing, or if you're given a story or a character that existed before and you're going to do your own spin on it, you know, what can you bring to that? Is it, like you said, is it starting ordinary and going to the gods, or is it, you know, taking the character into a world that just hasn't existed before, or a way of behaving, or how you visualize? So I think that's what I like. You know, it's that finding other ways. And with Children of Lear, it was actually quite a simple story, and the artwork is deliberately simple. But the story isn't actually that simple. There's 3 or 4 layers to it. So depending on your knowledge of history or mythology, you'll get different things from it. If you're a child reading this, or it's being read to you, you'll only focus on the little girl and the old man story.
Okay.
You won't get, I don't think, the other stuff. But somebody a bit older might go, oh, there's a reference here to, what's that why is there 3 British Army soldiers, 3 of them from the island of Ireland in the Middle East?
Yeah.
You know, those are questions that you wonder why, you know. I mean, I could have shown that 10 different ways. I could not have even gone near that topic, you know. So that there are layers, but the visual style that I chose was something that was quick to draw, would be immediate to look at. It's not dense, it's not stark. It pays homage to Tintin, I suppose, or Clear Line from Europe. So there were a lot of deliberate choices. Nothing was by accident.
Yeah, that's great. And I love a story where, as you said, with the layers. It's nothing better when you find a book you love, a film, and you go back and you read it or you watch it, and then you realise, I never spotted that before. And then it changes, it can turn it on its head or give you new depth or something like that. So that's great. Super. Okay, in that case then we're going to swap over to the visual side of it now, and then we'll pick back up in just a moment. And thanks very much Paul and Rob. Thank you. Thanks very much for joining us for this first episode. If you liked what you heard, please like and subscribe, share with family and friends. Growing this new podcast is all about spreading by word of mouth, so any shares are greatly appreciated. We have lots more to come in the coming months ahead. Look for a new episode dropping every week. And also, if you would like to know more about Task Art and the work that we do, please visit us at taskart.com, or you can find us at our online handle at taskart. That's TASQART. Until next time, this has been a copyright production from Collie Consultancy 2025.